Welcome back, everyone, to our weekly look at technology. Many of you are letting us know how helpful these are and informative they are. We're just having a ball doing this. And another thing, you also let me know, where's Ray? He wasn't here last week for something even technology can't solve.
Sorry about that.
You had a cold, right? Is that what it was? How you feeling?
I was miserable. I'm much better now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Part of this conversation that Ray and I have before we go on air every day is just hitting some of the real key issues that if you're an individual, you're concerned about, if you're a business, you're concerned about. A lot of this has to do with cloud computing and whatever, but we had a situation here, Ray, this past week where we took a power surge and we lost everything. And I think we were joking. I mean, my heart moved to my head and grew about this size.
Yeah.
We were fortunate we got it back again. But it really reminded me that something we don't think about every day are the disasters that could happen that affect our data.
Yes.
So, you're the expert. Disaster recovery plan, disaster plan?
Disaster recovery planning. Yeah, that's a key element in any business that depends on technology for its business. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. All right. Let's just say the obvious is that you lose your data. Mm-hmm. But that's more... I think all of us should be thinking more in terms of what is a preventive plan? Mm-hmm. You know, what is that about? So how do you approach that with your clients?
Well, what we typically do is start with the business and what's critical in the business, because when you talk about disaster recovery and planning for that, you're talking about additional cost, right? Basically, you're replicating a lot of things, and you can reduce the costs on the secondary and the tertiary as opposed to the primary, but you're adding cost, right? So that's important in any business. So we talk about the business and what's critical, and we might set several levels of importance for business applications. In other words, this is mission critical. If we lose it in our primary site, we have to be back up in 15 minutes or we're dead, you know, or if we're not back up within an hour, I mean, some businesses, you know, they could lose $1 million an hour. Those kind of things can happen, so, or more. So we talk about levels of importance based on the applications, and we talk about what's an internal application versus external facing, in other words, something that clients or business partners see and use versus something that runs the business internally. Mm-hmm. And we prioritize those things. And then what we'll do is we'll start to talk about how to back that information up, and then most importantly, how to restore it and restore it quickly. So what's the required recovery time? And so what we get into in medium and large businesses is something we call service level agreements, or SLAs. So in other words, the IT department or group may have a service level agreement whereby it is charged with responsibility to have these certain business applications constantly available, or if they go down or if there's an outage window, it can't be more than X, maybe an hour, you know, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, whatever the case may be. So the backup and disaster recovery strategy has to map to those business requirements. So that's where we start. It's really about consulting and understanding the importance of the different parts of the business, and then we build the technology to support the business requirements.
Oh boy, it's a real strategic approach, right? A lot of people can say do this, do that, but the whole idea, and you know, again, just because it's such a recent example with us, you know, all of a sudden you realize all the things you didn't do, you know, and quite honestly, we're good in media, but when it comes to technology, it's not our main thrust.
Right.
So we wouldn't think about these things. How does some of this interface with this cloud computing conversation we've been having?
Oh, there's a great nexus there, because you can use the cloud, you can use services available in the cloud to be your backup and your recovery. Okay. I mean, that's one of the table stakes of a lot of the cloud service providers that are out there today. Things like email and basic applications like that, and also storage, backup and recovery is a pretty... And depending on the complexity of the applications, you know, you have to be careful of the provider you pick, because if you're running very complex applications in-house, for example, if you're a hospital and you're running electronic medical records and there's a lot of imaging involved and the transport of images and the amount of bandwidth required, you have to be very careful about choosing your backup plan, because the backup and storage at the remote site where it's backed up has to be able to handle the complexity of what's going on the primary site, and the connection between the two has to be sufficient to move that information. But yeah, absolutely. You can look at the cloud as your backup or your tertiary site. Many companies, we have examples of clients that are in the same industry, for example, credit unions, who we've connected because the common ground between them is our company, because we're a service provider and a vendor to them both. So we've actually brought companies in the same industry together, and they've talked to each other, and they back up to each other's data centers across New York State, as an example. So that's one way, and that's private to private, right? Private network to private network.
Yeah.
But you could also back up to a public service, cloud service provider as well. So there's many approaches that could be taken, but again, it really starts with understanding the business requirements and the priorities and what the uptime demands are of the business, and then mapping the technology to that.
You know, I just want to cycle back on thinking, just as you're talking, you know, I'm learning, of course, but the whole sense of actually calculating how much downtime you can absorb before it affects your ability to function. I wouldn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You know, you think about, oh my God, it's not working, get it fixed, you know, without really understanding in advance or planning in advance for the inevitable that if you do go down, there better be part of the strategy here.
Absolutely.
To analyze, right?
Absolutely. And a good strategy will start with a policy. It'll start with a policy, you develop a service level agreement for the business, and you're going to just detail what those requirements are and why, and then you're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to execute that through your technology program.
Now, you can go to Anisa's website, and you were telling me that there's a page really dedicated to be able to walk you through some of this.
Yeah,
right?
within our data center practice pages, there are many references to disaster recovery planning and some of the tools and things that you can use to get started on that path.
Boy, Ray, thanks very much. We are also talking about some topics that we're going to cover in the weeks to come, and two of them really stand out to me. Collaboration and technology. Kind of phrases you don't, if you're in the business that I'm in, you don't put those words together too often, but when you do, man, does it make sense, right?
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It sounds important. Everything you say sounds important. You don't want to talk about color correction or audio mixing?
I'm interested in that too.
Yeah, that's great. And also something else that hit us as a result of what we faced last week, which is life cycle costs. You never think about that. So we've got two really strong topics coming up to talk about, but I can't encourage you enough in the meantime to go to Anisa's website and check into some of these disaster issues, the recovery plans, and the options that you have in getting from here to here if this goes boom.
Right.
That's technical. Boom. I don't know if
You use that term too.
Do you?
Yeah, sure.
Great, Ray. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for coming in. We'll see you next week.
All right, it's good to be back. Thanks, Jesse.
Good. To see this interview again, head to our website, looktvonline.com.